Women don't think the way you've been told they think, and that misunderstanding is costing you everything. The first secret of feminine nature is this: what you perceive as emotional inconsistency is actually strategic adaptability, a form of power so sophisticated that Machiavelli himself would recognize it as pure political genius. When a woman changes her mind about you overnight, when she seems impossible to pin down, when her desires shift like smoke, you're not witnessing confusion, you're witnessing strategy. The second secret cuts deeper. Vulnerability isn't weakness, but a weapon, and it's been used to topple empires while the men who built them never saw the blade coming. The third secret, the one that will fundamentally alter how you see every interaction for the rest of your life, is that feminine nature doesn't just exist in women. It exists in the architecture of power itself, and every great man in history who understood this became untouchable. Let me show you what I mean. Last week, a friend told me about his girlfriend. 3 months ago, she was obsessed with him, texted constantly, made plans, talked about the future. Then something shifted. She became distant, ambiguous. He did everything the internet told him to do, gave her space, doubled down on attention, tried to communicate. Nothing worked. He couldn't understand what changed. But here's what actually happened. Nothing changed about her feelings. What changed was her strategy. She adapted to new information. Maybe she sensed his desperation. Maybe she tested his frame and found it weak. Maybe she recognized that her initial investment gave him too much power. So she rebalanced the equation. This is the first secret in action. Feminine nature operates on adaptive power dynamics, constantly recalibrating based on environmental feedback. It's not personal, it's strategic. The Stoics understood something about human nature that we've forgotten. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle is the way, but he also understood that the greatest obstacle isn't external resistance. It's your inability to see the game being played right in front of you. Modern men stumble through relationships, careers, and social hierarchies completely blind to the strategic layer that governs all human interaction. They think everything is random. They believe in spontaneous emotion, authentic vulnerability, and honest communication as if these things exist in a vacuum. They don't. Every interaction is a negotiation. Every emotional display serves a function. Every moment of connection or distance recalibrates power. If you're watching this and recognizing patterns from your own life, if you're starting to see the invisible architecture underneath the surface chaos, then you're ready for what comes next. This isn't going to be comfortable. Understanding these secrets means you can never go back to naive trust. You'll see the strings on every puppet, including your own. But that discomfort is the price of power. And power is the only thing that gives you actual choice in this world. Here's the shadow side that nobody talks about. These 3 secrets come with a cost that might be higher than you're willing to pay. Once you understand feminine nature at this level, you become isolated. You watch other men get manipulated and you can't even explain what you're seeing because they're not ready to hear it. You enter relationships with women and you see every move 3 steps ahead, which kills spontaneity and makes genuine connection nearly impossible. You become the person who knows too much, and that knowledge creates distance between you and everyone still living in a comfortable illusion. The Stoics called this the burden of philosophy. Machiavelli called it the loneliness of the prince. I'm calling it the price of these 3 secrets. So why continue? Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending your entire life confused, reactive, and powerless while everyone around you plays a game you don't even know exists. The alternative is betrayal after betrayal, each one shocking you because you never saw it coming. The alternative is being the man who gives everything to people who only take, who trusts completely and gets destroyed repeatedly, who dies never understanding why his life went the way it did. If that's acceptable to you, stop watching now. Go back to sleep. But if you'd rather be awake, aware, and capable of navigating reality as it actually is, rather than as you wish it were, then we go deeper. The first secret deserves a complete examination because this is where most men get destroyed. Adaptive power means that feminine nature doesn't have a fixed strategy. It has a responsive strategy. Think about Cleopatra. She didn't seduce Caesar and Mark Antony the same way. With Caesar, she played the role of the vulnerable queen who needed protection from her brother's coup. She wrapped herself in a carpet and had herself smuggled into his chambers, presenting as both exotic prize and damsel in distress. Caesar, the most powerful man in the world, bit completely. With Mark Antony, different man, different strategy. He was a warrior who valued spectacle and excess. So Cleopatra arrived on a golden barge dressed as Venus, the goddess of love, presenting not as vulnerable, but as divine abundance. Same woman, same goal. Completely different approach based on reading her target. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as masterful statecraft. In The Prince, he writes about the importance of adapting to circumstances, of being both lion and fox, of changing tactics based on terrain. But here's what he observed that most men miss. This adaptive capability isn't just political skill, it's survival instinct refined over millennia. Women throughout history have had less physical power, fewer legal rights and limited access to direct authority. So they developed something more effective than brute force. They developed the ability to read power, dynamics instantly, and adjust their approach in real time. This isn't deception. It's sophisticated intelligence. Watch this play out in a modern corporate environment. A competent woman in a male-dominated industry doesn't have one personality. With the aggressive executive, she's confident and challenges his ideas directly because he respects strength. With the insecure middle manager, she asks questions and defers to his expertise because he needs to feel superior. With the HR department, she's by the book and professional because that environment rewards rule compliance. Same woman, same day. 3 completely different presentations. And here's the critical part. None of these are fake. They're all authentic expressions selected for strategic effectiveness. The average man watching this happen calls it being two-faced or manipulative because he's operating from a framework of fixed identity. He thinks you're supposed to be the same person in every situation, that authenticity means never adapting your approach. But the Stoics knew better. Epictetus taught that we played different roles in life. Child, parent, citizen, friend. Each role has different requirements. The wise person adapts their behavior to fulfill each role excellently. The fool insists on being the same in every context and wonders why nothing works. Here's where this gets practical for your life. When a woman in your life shifts her behavior toward you, most men react emotionally. They get confused, hurt, angry, or desperate. All of these reactions come from not understanding the first secret. She's not changing randomly. She's adapting to new data. Maybe you revealed weakness, and she's adjusting her level of respect. Maybe you became too predictable, and she's creating uncertainty to test if you're still engaged. Maybe the relationship dynamic shifted and she's rebalancing power. Once you see this clearly, you stop taking it personally and start thinking strategically. The Stoic response isn't to get emotional. It's to recognize the pattern, understand what changed in the environment, and adjust your own strategy accordingly. The second secret is more dangerous because it inverts everything you think you know about power. Vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It's one of the most effective weapons in the arsenal of influence, and it's been deployed throughout history with devastating precision. This is where most men's programming completely fails them. We're taught that vulnerability equals weakness, that showing emotion or admitting uncertainty makes you a target. So men armor up. They refuse to admit fault, never ask for help, and present a facade of invincible confidence even when they're drowning. And this makes them incredibly easy to manipulate. Here's how the weapon works. Strategic vulnerability creates several effects simultaneously. First, it triggers the protective instinct in others, making them want to help you. Second, it builds false intimacy by making the other person feel special and trusted. Third, it disarms suspicion because vulnerable people don't seem threatening. Fourth, it creates obligation because helping someone makes you invested in their success. A woman who understands this principle can walk into any situation and within minutes have multiple people eager to assist her, protect her, and advocate for her interests. And the brilliance is that it often comes from genuine emotion channeled strategically. Machiavelli understood this completely. In The Prince, he advises leaders to appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious, especially the last one because people judge by appearances. But notice he says appear, not be. He's not advocating for actual vulnerability. He's recognizing that the appearance of vulnerability and humanity makes you more effective at getting what you want than appearing invincible. The leader who admits a mistake gains loyalty. The negotiator who confesses a limitation builds trust. The person who shows appropriate emotion creates connection. All of these are strategic uses of calculated vulnerability. Look at how this plays out in modern relationships. A woman cries during an argument. What happens? Most men immediately soften. The logical points they were making seconds ago suddenly seem cruel. They shift from asserting their position to comforting her. The frame of the interaction completely changes. Now, I'm not saying every tear is strategic or that emotion is always calculated, but here's what you need to understand. Even genuine emotion can be deployed at the right moment for maximum effect. The woman who feels actual sadness but chooses to express it at the precise moment when it will be most impactful is using the second secret masterfully. Marcus Aurelius wrote about not being disturbed by the emotional displays of others, about maintaining your inner citadel regardless of external chaos. This is the Stoic counter to the second secret. You acknowledge the emotion, you respond with appropriate humanity, but you don't let it derail your judgment or manipulate your decisions. The untrained man sees tears and abandons all logic. The trained man sees tears and thinks clearly about whether his position is actually wrong or whether he's being emotionally leveraged. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you effective. Here's the modern application that will change your career. In any negotiation, the person who can deploy vulnerability strategically has a massive advantage. The job candidate who admits they're not perfect but shows genuine enthusiasm often beats the candidate with better credentials, who seems arrogant. The employee who confesses a mistake before it's discovered and takes responsibility gains more respect than the one who tries to hide it. The leader who occasionally admits uncertainty and asks for input builds more loyalty than the one who pretends to know everything. All of these are applications of the second secret. But here's the trap. If you're a man trying to use this principle, you have to be exceptionally careful. Our culture doesn't grant men the same permission for vulnerability that it grants women. A woman can cry in a business meeting and people will accommodate her. A man who cries in the same meeting has just destroyed his credibility. This isn't fair, but it's real. So the strategic deployment of vulnerability as a man requires much more precision. You're working with a narrower band of acceptable emotion and a harsher judgment for miscalculation. The third secret is the one that's going to reorganize your entire understanding of power, gender, and strategy. Everything I've told you so far has been about understanding feminine nature in women, but that's not the real secret. The real secret is that these principles, what we call feminine nature, aren't actually about gender at all. They're about a category of power that exists separate from masculine direct force. History's most effective leaders, warriors, and philosophers all understood this. They integrated both masculine and feminine strategic principles into their approach, and that integration made them unstoppable. Think about Julius Caesar. Brilliant military commander, right? Embodiment of masculine conquest and direct power. But read how he actually operated. He was a master of strategic vulnerability, deliberately getting into debt to create political obligations. He adapted his approach to every enemy and ally, never using the same tactic twice if circumstances changed. He understood emotional manipulation, public spectacle, and the power of calculated generosity. He wept publicly at appropriate moments. He forgave enemies to gain their loyalty. He used what we would call feminine strategies constantly, and they made his masculine military power exponentially more effective. Or consider Marcus Aurelius, the warrior philosopher. He spent years on military campaigns defending Rome's borders. the ultimate masculine duty. But read his meditations. He's constantly reminding himself to be flexible, to adapt, to not force situations, to work with the nature of things rather than against them. He talks about the interconnectedness of all things, about flowing like water, about strategic patience. These are all principles that our culture would code as feminine, but he recognized them as simply effective strategy regardless of gender. Machiavelli makes this explicit in The Prince. He personifies fortune as a woman and argues that she favors bold action, but he also describes the successful prince as needing to be both lion and fox. The lion is masculine, direct force, intimidation, power. The fox is feminine, cunning, adaptation, indirect influence. He's telling you directly that you need both. The prince who relies only on the lion gets outmaneuvered. The prince who relies only on the fox lacks the force to capitalize on advantages. You need the integration. Here's what this means for you. Modern masculinity has been reduced to a caricature. You're told that being a man means being direct, aggressive, unemotional, and dominant in every situation. This is cartoon masculinity, and it makes you rigid, predictable, and easy to defeat. The actually powerful man integrates the full spectrum of strategic options. He can be direct when directness serves his purpose. He can be adaptive when the situation requires it. He can deploy emotions strategically or maintain stoic detachment as needed. He's not locked into one mode of operation. Think about the areas of your life where you're failing right now. I'd bet significant money that you're failing because you're using only masculine strategies in situations that require feminine principles. You're trying to force outcomes through willpower when you should be creating conditions for natural flow. You're being rigidly consistent when you should be adapting to changing circumstances. You're presenting invulnerable strength when strategic vulnerability would build the alliances you need. You're using a hammer when you need a scalpel. The greatest barrier to male effectiveness in the modern world isn't that men are too masculine. It's that they're too rigidly limited to a narrow band of masculine strategies while refusing to integrate the complete strategic toolkit. And this refusal comes from insecurity. Men are terrified that using any strategy coded as feminine will make them less masculine, less respected, less powerful. But that fear is the cage that keeps you weak. Watch how this plays out in modern dating. The man who only knows direct pursuit, who asks women out straightforwardly, who communicates his interest clearly, who never plays games, this man thinks he's being admirably masculine, and he gets destroyed repeatedly by men who understand the full spectrum. The integrated man knows when to pursue and when to create space. He understands how to generate attraction through strategic uncertainty. He recognizes when direct communication serves him and when ambiguity is more effective. He's not locked into one approach. He reads the situation and deploys the appropriate strategy. The Stoics would call this living in accordance with nature, not your ego's idea of what you should be, but responding appropriately to reality as it actually is. Epictetus taught that we suffer when we demand that the world operate according to our preferences rather than its actual nature. The man who insists that direct, masculine strategies should work in every situation is arguing with reality, and reality doesn't care about your preferences. Here's the final layer that brings all three secrets together. The reason these secrets are so powerful is that they've been hidden in plain sight. Everything I've told you is observable if you just watch human behavior without your ideological filters. Women adapt strategically. Vulnerability functions as influence, and effective power requires integrating multiple modes of operation. This is all obvious, but our culture has wrapped these observations in so much moral judgment and gender warfare that most people can't see them clearly. You've been trained to think that noticing strategic female behavior makes you a misogynist, that recognizing vulnerability as a tool makes you cynical, that integrating feminine strategies makes you less of a man. All of these are social antibodies designed to keep you from seeing clearly, because the person who sees clearly has power. and systems of control depend on keeping most people confused and reactive. The man who understands these three secrets operates on a different level than everyone around him. In relationships, he's never confused by female behavior because he recognizes the strategic layer underneath the emotional presentation. He doesn't get angry when a woman adapts her approach because he expects it. He deploys his own strategic vulnerability to build connection and influence. He integrates masculine and feminine principles fluidly based on what the situation requires. This makes him incredibly effective and incredibly lonely. The loneliness comes from seeing the game that everyone else is playing unconsciously. You watch friends get into relationships, and you can predict exactly how they'll fail because you see the patterns. You observe colleagues at work, and you know who's genuinely effective versus who's just performing. Effectiveness. You scroll through social media, and you see the manipulation tactics that everyone else thinks is authentic sharing. This awareness is isolating because you can't explain what you see to people who aren't ready to see it. They think you're cynical or damaged or overthinking everything. But here's the final truth. This isolation is also freedom. The man who sees clearly isn't controlled by the same invisible strings that puppeteer everyone else. He makes real choices based on accurate understanding rather than reacting to stimuli he doesn't understand. He builds genuine connections with the rare people who also see clearly, connections that go deeper than the surface-level relationships most people settle for. He becomes dangerous in the best possible way, capable of protecting himself and the people he cares about. The Stoics understood that philosophy wasn't meant to make life easier or more comfortable. It was meant to make you capable of living well regardless of circumstances. These three secrets are the same. They don't make relationships simpler. They don't make you happier in some naive sense. But they make you effective. They give you agency. They transform you from someone things happen to into someone who shapes outcomes. So where does this leave you? You've learned that feminine nature operates on strategic adaptation, that vulnerability functions as sophisticated influence, and that truly powerful people integrate both masculine and feminine principles regardless of gender. You can't unknow these things now. Every interaction you have going forward will be filtered through this understanding. The question is what you do with it. The low road is manipulation. You can use these insights purely for selfish gain, treating every relationship as a game to win and every person as a resource to exploit. This path leads to short-term success and long-term emptiness. Machiavelli warns about this. The prince who rules through fear alone eventually gets betrayed. The person who manipulates everyone ends up surrounded by people who are only there for what they can get. The high road is strategic wisdom. You understand these principles and you use them ethically. You recognize when someone is deploying them on you and you protect yourself without becoming bitter. You integrate these strategies into your approach to make yourself more effective at achieving goals that actually matter. You build relationships with people who also understand the game and choose to play it honorably. This is the Stoic path, clear sight about reality combined with virtue in how you respond to that reality. Most men never reach this level of understanding. They stumble through life reacting emotionally to patterns they don't recognize, getting manipulated repeatedly, wondering why things never work out the way they expected. They blame women for being confusing. They blame the system for being rigged. They blame bad luck for their failures. And they never recognize that they're playing a game without knowing the rules. You now know the rules. The three secrets of feminine nature aren't really about understanding women. They're about understanding power itself. The person who adapts strategically wins. The person who deploys vulnerability wisely builds influence. The person who integrates the full spectrum of strategic options becomes formidable. Gender is almost irrelevant to these principles. They're just effective strategy regardless of who's using them. The final test is whether you can hold this knowledge without becoming bitter or cynical. Can you see the strategic layer of human interaction without losing your capacity for genuine connection? Can you recognize manipulation without becoming manipulative yourself? Can you integrate feminine principles into your masculine frame without losing your core identity? These are the questions that separate the wise from the merely clever. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way. The confusion you felt about feminine nature, the frustration with female behavior that brought you to this video, that impediment was actually the door to understanding power itself. The woman who confused you was teaching you to see strategy. The relationship that failed was showing you where your approach was incomplete. The manipulation you experienced was demonstrating principles you needed to learn. Everything has been preparation for this moment. You now have a choice. You can take these 3 secrets and become someone who sees clearly, acts strategically, and lives with the burden and the power of accurate understanding. Or you can reject what you've learned, go back to comfortable ignorance, and continue being confused and reactive. Both paths are available, but only one path leads to genuine capability and self-determination. The Stoics believed that the purpose of philosophy was to live excellently, to achieve eudaimonia, human flourishing at the highest level. That doesn't mean comfort or ease. It means being fully capable of responding to reality with virtue and effectiveness. These 3 secrets are philosophical tools in that tradition. They help you see accurately. They give you strategic options. They make you capable of navigating the most complex and important areas of human life: relationships, power, and influence. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a practical guide for rulers, but his real audience was anyone who wanted to be effective in a world where power matters. You're part of that audience now. You've learned what takes most men a lifetime to figure out, if they ever figure it out at all. The question is whether you have the discipline and wisdom to use this knowledge well. Watch what happens in your life over the next weeks and months. You'll see these 3 secrets playing out everywhere. In every relationship, in every workplace interaction, in every social dynamic. The patterns that were invisible will now be obvious. The behaviors that seemed random will now make perfect strategic sense. And you'll face the constant choice of whether to use this understanding constructively or destructively. Choose wisely. The power you now possess is real, and power without wisdom destroys the person who wields it just as surely as it destroys their targets. But power combined with Stoic virtue and Machiavellian strategic sense creates someone truly formidable. Someone who shapes outcomes instead of being shaped by them. Someone who sees clearly and acts effectively. Someone who understands both masculine and feminine principles and integrates them into a complete strategic approach. That's the promise of these 3 secrets. Not comfort, not ease, not simple answers, but capability, agency, and the power to navigate reality as it actually exists, rather than as you wish it were. Everything else is details. You know what you need to know. What you do with it now is entirely up to you.